It was June 2019, and I was living in Savannah, Georgia, a city known for its southern charm, live oak forests draped with Spanish moss and historic homes. But beneath this picturesque facade lies a dark secret. It was here that I first confronted the shocking neglect of America's slave graves. Picture this: I'm wandering through Laurel Grove Cemetery on a sweltering summer afternoon. Yes, I'm one of those weird people who strolls through cemeteries from time to time. Kind of like that saying, memento mori. Remember, you will die. Getting closer to death sometimes reminds us to live, but it's also a historical interest, so I was there. The air was thick with humidity, making you feel like you're swimming through soup. The only sound was my shoes crunching on the gravel, loud in the otherwise silent graveyard. And Laurel Grove Cemetery is divided into two sections. Laurel Grove North, a place of sculptural and delicate beauty, otherworldly and truly breathtaking, is how visitors have described it. They rave about its peaceful and mesmerizing atmosphere. The graves here are surrounded by freshly cut grass and vibrant flowers, meticulously maintained, reflecting care and respect. But then you go to Laurel Grove South, the black side, the resting place for melanated individuals, including former slaves, and reviews paint a much grimmer picture. One review says, quote, "The area is very sketchy and not safe after the sun goes down," unquote. The graves here are neglected, overgrown with weeds and littered with cigarette butts. Many markers are crumbling. Some graves have no markers at all, just sunken patches of earth hinting at their presence. Think about this: on one side, a serene, picturesque landscape that could be a setting for a Southern romance novel. On the other, a neglected, almost forgotten plot of land, overgrown, unkempt, telling the story of suffering, segregation, and injustice. So as I stood in Laurel Grove South, my heart felt heavy for the lives buried there, lives marked by hardship, lives marked by cruelty, now neglected in death. The contrast between the well-kept and the neglected graves was a reminder of the deep-seated inequality that persists even in our cemeteries. I could almost hear the whispers of the past, the untold stories of those who lie beneath my feet. I think it's easy to overlook these hidden stories, but once you uncover them, they demand to be remembered. I've been following stories of mass graves and unmarked graves of slaves because for me, it isn't just about graves. It's about how we remember and value human life. It's about facing uncomfortable truths and asking ourselves what kind of society we want to be. Let's talk about an example at Clemson University. Imagine a bustling university campus at Clemson in South Carolina, students rushing to classes, tailgating before football games, and spilling their Bud Light on the very ground where hundreds of enslaved people lie buried. These students, many oblivious to the history beneath their feet, celebrate on the bones of people who lived their lives there as slaves. The story of these graves is both shocking and heart-wrenching. Dating back to the early 1800s, these graves at Clemson were unmarked and forgotten as the university expanded. And then over time, they were literally paved over with buildings and walkways constructed on top of them. Some of these graves are even overbuilt by the marked graves of white people, a reminder of the hierarchy that persisted in death. The graves of the enslaved, those who built the foundations of the land, both literally and figuratively, are now hidden beneath the graves of their oppressors. How on earth could something like this happen? Well, in the 19th century, the land that now houses Clemson University was part of a plantation. Enslaved Africans worked this land, lived their lives, and when they died, they were buried there. And then as Clemson grew, the memory of these enslaved individuals faded, and the land was repurposed without consideration for those who lie beneath it. Rhonda Thomas, a professor of African American literature at Clemson, leads a team working to piece together the identities of the dead in what she calls a sacred space. And her team wants to memorialize, quote, "those who have been so dishonored and disrespected over time." As a university, we have a responsibility to teach our students and our campus community how to embrace complex, painful, troubling history, and we need to start with our own, unquote. Let me give you another example. Consider Robert Meacham, a man who bought his freedom and rose to become a state senator in Florida. He was forced out of school for his mixed race despite his white father's wish that he get an education. Meacham helped other black enslaved people to learned, quote, secretly at night using the dim glare of a candle for light, unquote, one account says. And now his grave might be under a parking lot in Tampa. Imagine achieving so much against unimaginable odds only to be forgotten in such a callous manner. This isn't just an oversight, it's a cover-up, literally. A man who fought for freedom and justice, buried under asphalt, a chilling metaphor for how society treats the legacies of Black Americans. It's easier to pave over dark history than to reconcile with it, but think about what a grave represents, a marker of a life lived, a place for the living to grieve and remember. Without these markers, we lose our connection to our past and the lessons it holds. Let's continue our journey to Lower Manhattan. Historians and anthropologists estimate that over the decades, as many as 15 to 20,000 Africans were buried in what was once the largest colonial era cemetery for enslaved African people. This fact came to light only after protests by activists and scholars and politicians and Black New Yorkers halting the construction of a government building that was going to be built over these graves. They demanded respect and recognition, resulting in the exhumation of some 419 remains. And so this 1991 discovery of one of Manhattan's most significant historical landmarks began like many other days in the city, with construction crews breaking ground for a new building. And then archaeological digging for this federal office building at 290 Broadway had just begun and quickly uncovered this dark history of New York that reminded the world that Manhattan was just as guilty of the horrors of slavery as the South. Thousands of skeletal remains belonging to free and enslaved Black people who lived and worked in colonial New York. It would turn out to be the largest and earliest African burial ground discovered in the United States. This wasn't just an archaeological discovery, it was a reclamation of dignity. These remains told stories of lives filled with struggle and resilience. They demanded to be seen and to be heard, and they actually memorialized it. Then this highlights the importance of acknowledging the past to heal and move forward. Tallahassee, Florida. The Capital City Country Club discovered 40 slave graves buried under its property beneath the 7th fairway of its golf course. Imagine golfers teeing off completely oblivious to the fact that beneath the manicured grass lies a history of pain and suffering. And that's because this country club was part of the Edward Houston plantation, the site believed to have 23 graves of enslaved people and 14 additional possible grave sites just built over with the fairway. And I could go on, but these stories aren't just about Clemson. They're not just about Tampa. They're not just about Manhattan. This cuts across presidents, states, continents. Think about Mount Vernon, where George Washington's estate houses unmarked graves of the enslaved. Consider Media Village at the Rio Olympics, built on a mass grave of slaves. In Sugar Land, Texas, a new school's construction uncovered an unmarked cemetery with 95 bodies, likely those of convict laborers. These aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a pattern that spans the globe and spans history, from Brazil's colonial era sugar mills to the fields of Texas. We see a continuous thread of disregard for the sanctity of these graves. Ask yourself, why is it that the graves of the enslaved are buried beneath those of their oppressors? What does this say about the value we place on different lives, even in death? How can we reconcile this with our supposed commitment to equality and justice? How can we claim to honor the past and we're literally burying it under layers of convenience and disregard? And consider this too. The very act of burying someone is a huge statement about their worth and dignity. The earliest known burials date back over 100,000 years, symbolizing respect for the dead and helping the living come to terms with loss. So neglecting these graves is an act of erasure, a denial of their humanity and contributions. What does it say about our society when the final resting places of the oppressed are disrespected? It's a chilling metaphor for how we deal with uncomfortable truths, by burying them under layers of indifference and neglect. How many other graves lie hidden beneath our feet, under parking lots, under schools, under golf courses, under government buildings? How many stories have we paved over in our rush to bury the past? You know, as I sit here looking over my notes for this show, I really thought back about that great sense of responsibility I felt as I walked through those neglected grave sites, seeing the contrast between the well-kept and the forgotten. And it made me realize just how much we've overlooked, how much we've buried, not just in the ground, but in our collective memory. How can we move forward if we refuse to confront the uncomfortable truths of our past? And what kind of society do we really want to be? Do we want to be a society that continues to bury its history, or one that faces it head on, learns from it, and grows stronger? These stories demand to be remembered. They demand to be honored, and it's up to us to ensure that they are. And if you want to dive even deeper, check out the links in the description to my courses and my book and my ebooks. Every subscription, every purchase helps keep this important work going. Together, we can ensure that these stories are never forgotten. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining me. 1,000 thanks. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Signing off. It's me, Jermaine Fowler. Keep asking the hard questions. Let's keep learning and keep growing.